everybody? Welcome to another Spark of Genius Flesh and Blood production. And we have a Lexi deck tech. No, that is not Yuki in the middle there. That is Eli T. I'm just bringing every single... My goal in life is just to bring every single one of my locals on to the channel here.
How many? You got 3 so far?
We had
Three or
Clay
four now?
and Ian, who came on last
Clay,
year.
Ian, Yuki, of course.
We had Yuki on, and Eli's our 4th.
How many more you got, Eric? How many more?
we have a couple. We have definitely a couple more that can like spike Canadian Nats, and then I'm bringing them on, right? It's definitely feasible here. So we do have Eli in the center. I'm obviously joined by my co-creator, co-commentator, co-caster, co-compatriot on the bottom. That is Rob. Nothing's really changed with Rob, but it is a list. I'll tell you that. As far as looking through the Lexi list, Eli did top 8 the calling in Vegas, but
Vegas
550-ish people in the calling. Is a very large calling. It's an 8-round day 1, 5-round day 2, 13 total, I believe. I think it was that. I honestly don't remember. But we have the list here, so we brought on Eli to kind of explain his thought process through the list, what he likes, dislikes, a little bit of the matchup notes. So anyone who's playing this for last week at Nats, ProQuest, so on and so forth. Eli is a diehard Lexi man. This man was playing Lexi from the beginning. From the beginning, I think from the beginning, more or less, that you pretty much did like your full ice elemental lists for a pretty long time. I remember playing against it for sure, way back when. And then you're on Fuseless now, so we could talk about how you switched to the dark side here to potentially win some more games. So welcome to the channel, Eli.
No, thank you both. Much appreciated. And yeah, respect trying to bring slowly but surely all of the Vancouver meta on the channel for one reason or another. It'll happen in time. It's something. Let's say that. It's small but mighty. I think
small but mighty is the perfect sentence to describe that meta.
Yeah, I think we started to solidify that.
Yeah, getting a 3-0 armory just feels like winning a pro class in most other regions. So
yeah, for sure. It's no free games. Let's put it that way.
There are no free games unless you get to buy, but that's
you guys
even that.
Any, like new people come in, like just a new player wants to come in and play. You guys just
they do. It happens. No, it happens for sure. And people still like.
You got to give them an edge. You can't just give them
it's really good.
It's a warm embrace. It's a tight embrace, but we actually, you know what? With respect to that too, we have in the last 6 months or so, the scene has grown a fair bit. It was really nice. I know even like on the evening of a bunch of us leaving for the Vegas calling a couple weeks ago, there was supposed to be an armory, and we weren't sure whether or not that was going to fire at one of our LGSs. But there was absolutely enough people that I think one of them even referred to themselves as the B team, which was which was adorable and also not true because everyone certainly is a contender. But so that's really great to see too. Is that even though I think like a dozen of us or so left,
I think
from Vancouver,
what happened is word got out that you were leaving, and then they all just came back.
That's right. Yeah.
Like, all right, the good guys.
All bunch of new people showed up. Yeah.
That's right. We can finally play. No, I'm just kidding.
So let's get a little bit into the list here. Why? I guess I'm not gonna say why Lexi. Usually I start with why Lexi.
Sure.
Now we all
know. And right you are though. Like I definitely a Lexi diehard. I started playing like just a little after Tales came out, and the reason I kind of picked up the game at all was because of Lexi and also because of Ice Lexi in particular, because that was certainly my bit. So even during the calling, I was every time I flipped on my hero and someone kind of rolled their eyes or kind of muttered something under their breath, I was like, listen, I've been in the trenches. I've been in the trenches a long time. Okay. I earned it. For every like weave ice that I drew that I couldn't play, or every arrow that I drew that I couldn't fuse, like it took a long time.
You've been there.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So I guess we could start generally. Let's just start with the equipment first. I know we have the top row, the kind of standard
here.
Package, Hornets, Sting, Snaps.
I'm just gonna check for sideboards. Okay, there are some.
There's 3 other pieces. Yeah, there's 3 other pieces down there we can chat about.
Talk to me about the side. I think the list. The
main board is pretty much Mainboard,
right?
Yeah, I would say so.
I mean, the only ARM piece you'd run is Hornets, I guess, and the rest is pretty.
Hornets is coming in against almost everything other than folks who might throw arcane damage at you, and also against Dash. And Dash is just a hedge against T-Bone, essentially, or getting your equipment blown up out of nowhere. Because if you're running Hornet Sting into that matchup, it'll block 1 damage, but then it's gone. So I brought it in against the 1 dash matchup I played, and if they ever did throw T-Bone at me, I just threw up a shock
Ah.
Charmers. I was like, there you go.
Makes
They
sense.
also sometimes get a little bit of psychic damage for when you flip that up, because they may think you're on some sort of version of the ice list. What that actually amounts to, I don't know, but sometimes
they can use their imaginations to figure that out.
That's right. Yeah.
It is onboard tricks though. I mean, Charmers does.
It is onboard tricks. No, it has text.
Damage across. If you have a bunch of blues, it is not
Yeah.
unreasonable to get like every damage counts, right? So
Yeah, for sure.
that makes sense. But you have to trench is an interesting piece of equipment
Yeah.
because I don't know about you, but I waffled on this piece of equipment a lot,
Mhm.
especially because like trench perch into stuff like when Bravo was becoming a bit of a problem with like fatigue style, trench Charmers, trench Null Rune, like AB2 versus Iyslander, Kano. Like I think it was all over the place. I ended up running it anyways, and I see you ran it too. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are about trench. Maybe specifically if you like it at all after this event, or what you kind of see it as now, as compared to everyone wanting this thing before to get around like stuff like Red Encase and Iyslander and like very
for sure
stuff.
I do think that trench, like I'm a big believer. Well, I wouldn't say a big believer. I am still a believer at some level in trench, and do think it still probably has a home in the deck. I totally understand the pull away that I think Yuki and some other folks have made away from trench, just running something like Null Rune Gloves and Tunic and things like the Iyslander matchup. This was kind of just what I practiced into Iyslander in particular with trench and Charmers, just for having AB1, being able to get around things like Encase if you needed to, Warmongers if you needed to, things like that, and then also having the Spell Void to kind of deny or at least forestall the kill turn, and that's just kind of what I became acclimated to doing. And I thought about making the switch over and doing the Null Rune Gloves piece, and getting the resources back with Tunic, et cetera, et cetera. But I just never wanted to spend the time really trying to relearn some of the kind of fiddly elements of that matchup to make that happen. And I was pretty happy with the utility that Trench offered. Again, it gets around Warmongers, which can be really nice. It's fun, I'll say, at least into the Uzuri matchup, because you can get rid of your arsenal in a pinch, and then all of a sudden Leave No Witnesses, CNC, et cetera, starts to matter a lot less.
Mm-hmm.
So having those outs can feel really good. It didn't end up being too instrumental just because of the matchups I ended up playing in Vegas, but I was certainly happy to have it, and I'm a big believer in having those weird kind of niche tech pieces at those large events when you do play like 13 rounds of Swiss, because you don't know what you're going to run into. Heart of Ice has long been a choice for that for me, although it's not in this list in particular. But I think having those outs through something just like the chest equipment is pretty useful for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair. So, Shock Charmers, I think you already kind of mentioned dash, wizards, things like that. Did you?
It's really there again to kind of prevent the kill turn for either Iyslander or Kano, because you never know. Like sometimes a Kano just shows up, side swipes your whole day, all of a sudden you just lost a round. And having Heart of Ice is another huge one, but Charmers as well, just to stuff a Wildfire turn or to stuff a Strider's kill turn for Iyslander, things like that. It's really handy, and it has text. So there you go.
People forget it has text. It's definitely something that happens here. Quiver of Abyssal Depths. Yeah. I imagine it's like anti-fatigue. Did you end up liking this card at all, or?
Quiver's one of the ones. Yeah, Quiver's one of the ones that, again, it was I had contemplated cutting ahead of the event, but because I had practiced into things like Bravo with it there, and even tried it into Uzuri, if I knew ahead of time that they were going to be on a fatigue kind of contract list, it was something that I'd already had, and figured, you know what, it's too soon to try to make too many of these adjustments, also in play patterns and stuff as well, and seeing what this one extra slot could get me. It's definitely one of the cards I'm revisiting going into Nats and thinking more about, and whether or not it's doing what I want it to do. Because I do think that there is utility to this, but Rustling Leaves also is good into pretty much any matchup as well. So it is competing for a pretty competitive slot. And whether or not it's actually playing enough weight, I think, is something that I'm still kind of mulling over.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. I mean, Rustling Leaves just turning a blue into, like, at best case of 1 cost, like 5 arrow, like Heat Seeker, Infecting Shot, shit like that.
Whatever.
It's pretty
Rustling Leaves turned into a drill shot for me that was super critical in Vegas. Like, that card just does stuff. And I do love, the sicko in me loves the kind of random nature of it. You don't actually know what you're going to get.
Oh, absolutely.
And where better than Vegas to try, throw a blue into the wind and see what comes up. But it was great.
Just gotta play KO at 20 health or 19 health.
That's right. But it would, like, this card's fantastic, and I'm never upset to bring it into any matchup, which is one of kind of the reasons that Abyssal Depths gets a little awkward, even if you do want to recur, 3 arrows into something like Bravo. because it will extend your game plan out and allow you to fatigue them. Not having that extra damage that can help you, get over the top or land an on hit, that is a cost unto itself too.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Let's talk kind of quickly about your core here, which isn't.
I'm looking for any spicy picks. Haven't found anything yet.
Is it vastly? Well, we could talk. Well, there's a couple cards that maybe.
There's a couple cards that aren't in here, which is it might not be at 3, which is interesting. Obviously, I know you talked with Yuki as well about the two kind of core pieces of Tar Pit and Lightning Press, which maybe kind of help to define the deck. Although those are sideboard pieces, they're not in the kind of core 50 some odd cards.
Right.
Yeah. But as far as the main board goes, there's not too much in here other than I only brought 2 red Searings to Vegas and 2 red Drill Shots to Vegas. So I was a little low on my 0-cost arrow count. Partially just because of in testing and in thinking about the matchups I was most worried about are the ones that I anticipated having to come up against. Things like Mirror, things like Iyslander, so on and so forth. Having, at that point in time, 6 drill shots, I was like, you know what, maybe I'm going to experiment with cutting 1 red drill shot out of the list because the blues demand a block anyway. If you opt to shoot them and in the matches where they matter. And some of the times into other lists, I found the reds weren't pulling weight. Similar with Searing, where it's great to push that damage. That's all it's ever doing, right? It's why I'm not a huge believer in blue Searing, is because best case scenario, its ceiling is going to be 3 damage, which isn't awful. But I wasn't super impressed with it. So I didn't end up putting the blues in. I put in blue pathing instead. Some of my thinking on that, and certainly some of the matchups that I played, like I may bump up some of those 0-cost arrows, although I'm still not a huge believer in blue Searing. I really do love blue pathing Helix in what it represents, even though it's the most innocuous arrow in the world. Like it's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite blues in the deck, even though it's certainly not one of the best blues in the deck.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, that's fair.
Threatening the reload, basically, that could be huge if you use both. Takes on your Voltaire, and this is your second arrow, and your opponent has to think pretty hard about blocking this one, even if it's just 2 damage.
Totally, or on a Rain Razor's 3 of a kind turn, like that does happen. In my day 2 at the calling, I was agonizing, or it was the end of day 1 of the calling. I actually had to play against Lucas, who's another local in Vancouver, and I was agonizing over getting this blue pathing Helix to hit off of Rain Razors, and I was kind of mapping out the turn in my head before I played a 3 of a kind, and I kind of had sort of thought I got it to the point where I wanted it. So I played the Rain Razors, I played the 3 of a kind, and then I just drew 2 red Bolton shots anyway. So the pathing Helix ended not mattering because I could just shoot for 7 instead of 4 to get the reload. But it was, it could have mattered.
And it's a blue.
That is what matters.
So,
it's a blue. So there you go.
But I feel like that's like Lexi in a nutshell. All these cards are just like, it could have mattered.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the key. If your blues could matter at some point, they're doing their job, honestly.
Yeah, and that's often how I think I'm evaluating them too, is like, what is the ceiling for this and what is the floor, right? Like, what is the best case scenario and where would that actually make a big difference?
Yeah.
Sure. I think the last thing that maybe is not as obvious, but you have triple premeditate in there, and that's not
okay. So
premeditate's a little interesting because when Warmongers came out, people wanted to try to cut more of their non-attacks, not to get kind of sideswiped with Warmongers, because then you can't Lexi flip. I mean, you can play it, you choose peace, and you kind of do nothing, right?
Sure. But that's where this baby comes in. The trench.
You do have the trench. Is that kind of like the only reason you're kind of back up to 3, or is there kind of like some kind of is the card just so powerful that they're running any less than 3 really is like warranted? Like is it something that you can cut 1 and get like another red arrow or something, or is it just like super good in certain matchups that you really like running through them? Yeah,
I default to running 3. Like it's kind of in this weird limbo space between being a main board card and a sideboard card. It's certain 3 of them are usually in more often than they're not. And I think that there's the kind of latter suggestion that you brought up of it's just so powerful that it's worth the risk is more where I land. I think there's a little bit of nuance to it too. There are things like Trench that Rob has brought up where you can in a pinch get rid of it if you need to. But for me, more than anything, you often just don't want to be arseling this card to begin with. Like if your concern is Warmongers, unless something weird happened, like you drew this off a Ponder token, or there's some kind of you drew it off a 3 of a kind. Like if you see this card naturally just in your kind of like draw back up at the end of turn cycle, like you're going to play it next turn. So you're not going to want to shove this into Arsenal very often, and certainly not into the matchups where Warmongers is present. Yeah, exactly. Like you're going to play around it, and it's a card that's worth playing around those patterns for. I think for sure. It just gets you so much leverage into some of your toughest matchups, and helps you to go over the top into those matchups where you really need that to happen. And in addition, like I'm cutting it into things. My real concern is running into something like Red in the Ledger, right? And having it just be like, I can't do anything with this card. And in that case, you pull it out and you put in Lightning Press, which is a card that you can get +3/4 and you can run if you hit in Red Ledger, right? So like there is flexibility with Premeditate where I am going to want to pull it out, but by and large, Warmongers I don't think is as much of a silver bullet to a card like that, or to Lexi in general, as maybe we evaluated, when that card got spoiled, or in kind of like initial play testing. You can absolutely play around it. They're not always going to have it for one thing, and even if they do, like. You shouldn't be sitting on pre-med in Arsenal most of the time, regardless.
Yeah, exactly. You've got 3 of these, they've got 3 of those. If they don't line up, then you're okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense. We could probably move on to the sideboard here. Everything else looked pretty standard. It's funny because your sideboard and my sideboard look almost identical. Other than maybe Quiver, they look pretty much the same.
Yeah,
it's kind of
I believe that.
So I probably know the reasonings behind these thoughts because I imagine it's very similar to mine.
We can all talk about it. So
let's go.
Don't hide your thoughts,
for Rob
I don't have thoughts about it.
Just to make sure.
But I can interview both of you guys on this.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let's look at the arrows first. So you have the blue Withering Shot, you have 3 fatigue and 3 sleep dart. So let's look at the red ones first. So fatigue shot, sleep dart. First? Why? So I guess first of all, why 3 of them? And second of all, why those specific arrows?
Totally. Fatigue is there's a great, it feels like arcane lore now, but like there is an article that I think Yuki wrote like when this card got spoiled like a year or some odd time ago, like when Everfest came out. And like if anyone's wondering like why is Fatigue Shot on the list, like go read that because I think she articulates it really well. And I think we've all forgotten about that in some respect because it was essentially like this treatise on Fatigue Shot's one of the best arrows they've ever printed, and like it's probably going to be in every Ranger deck forever. And then it wasn't. But I think a lot of the points there are really salient, and I will kind of do a terrible job of paraphrasing them.
Give us the TLDR.
yeah. The Fatigue Shots were just really good into almost every matchup. You could put this arrow in. Like it's not true. It's not universally true, but I'd say 80+% off the top of my head of matchups. Like in my sideboard guide, this can come in, and I'm happy because it's super good into the obvious matchups. Things like Bravo, right, where like all of a sudden that Crippling's going down to 5, or their Spinal's going down to 5, and the Crippling's going down to maybe it's 5 or 6. Whatever, round up. I can't do the math in the head right now. And you're really taking away a lot of agency from those really big attacks. But it's also just oftentimes as good, if not better, than something like a red Withering Shot, which I'm seeing a lot of people run. Right, where like this is going to take away on average into like a Lexi mirror 2 power, which is about what a Withering Shot's going to do most of the time. Right. It's and this doesn't take up the sideboard slots that Withering Shot would, right? I can bring this into more matchups than I can a Withering because the Frailty token doesn't matter universally. Negating X damage off the top of your first attack is universally.
It's always going to matter.
It's always going to matter. It's always life.
One damage off.
Save. Yeah, exactly, right? Like usually the floor for this card is 2, which is not bad, right? And oftentimes people run something like Remorseless in this slot, I think, which it kind of occupies a similar role, if not the same role.
Yeah.
And sometimes Remorseless, you shred like 5 life off of someone because they have this huge turn and they willingly take the Remorseless damage. But oftentimes, Remorseless is like the last arrow you shoot in the turn and they've already blocked, so then they block out or whatever. Like Remorseless isn't actually getting you as far. That's one of those arrows that like I'm not super huge on. Whereas Fatigue Shot to me occupies a similar role and can deny on hit breakpoints where something like Remorseless can't. It does everything you want it to do most of the time. This always kind of is going to save you life on the back end, and then also potentially save you from having to deal with like a nasty on hit, depending on how your opponent has to now structure their turn. You're also messing with their sequencing because maybe now they can't play the attack that they wanted to play first because they have to deal with the Fatigue Shot.
And
shaving off the top.
They can afford to take some more damage here or there and just do their combo anyway. But if you end your turn on this and they've already taken the first few arrows, that's like, crap, now
all of a sudden, it's like shooting any sort of disruption kind of at the end, something like a hamstring shot, whatever, where all of a sudden you've changed what they thought they were going to do. Exactly. A card like Remorseless, which I think this competes with a lot, doesn't do that. Like they can just do their turn, right? Unless you're really, really low health totals. The amount of times in testing I shot a Remorseless at someone and they're like, well, it's just damage.
I'll just take it.
It's like infinite, right? Like that's all the time because you're actually not really stripping them of agency. Fatigue Shot's very good at stripping people of agency and actually having to force them to take suboptimal lines or deal with something that they weren't expecting to have to deal with. So I'm a big fan of this card. It doesn't always get quite to the ceiling that you want it to get, but you can bring it into a lot of matchups. It's like readily into the main deck, more so than something like a Withering or a Merciless, and I'm never upset when I draw that card.
Yeah. Awesome.
Sure.
I guess we can move on to, it's
Sleep
sister or brother, Sleep Dart.
Sure.
I've always paired it in my mind as like the two.
Oh, this is a crew card though. It's not Everfest.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
They got a similar vibe to them though, for sure. Knocking people asleep just feels good. This is something that is definitely a little more, matchup dependent. Like I'm bringing in Sleep Dart against fewer opponents, I would say overall, or fewer matchups at least, than I am bringing Fatigue Shot. This is just super good into a lot of your problem matchups, right? This is really good in Dromai to deny the go again and the ash making for dragons. It's good in something like Katsu.
Too, maybe.
Yeah. Iyslander can play around it unless they already have something in Arsenal that's not going to work for them,
right?
Or something that they're trying to sit on in particular, and now all of a sudden they have to make the decision of, well, I'm actually going to move this now or am I not? It's really good into Katsu because you're just denying them, the ability to go and tutor for something. Right. Like there's just a lot of utility. It's great into Levia. There's so many cards in this deck that are good into Levia. Oh man,
very good into Levia. Like insanely good into Levia.
Sleep Dart, just like anytime you stop and think, well, how much of this person's deck hinges on them getting to do something with their hero every turn? Sleep Dart just comes in, and it comes in happily, right? So you're going to leave this in the board against Dash. You're going to leave this in the board against certain heroes. Sometimes even, but you're bringing it in against Bravo just because you want a bunch of cards against Bravo. But there are definitely certain heroes where this is not going to do as much, but that's okay because we have things like Fatigue Shot that we're bringing in. Even CNC sometimes, is just an arrow you can't shoot off 3 of a kind because it costs 2, it comes in for 6. You're going to end your turn with it. Like there are other options instead of Sleep Dart in some of the matchups where this isn't going to be as useful. But the ones where it is consequential, it becomes like this must block arrow, right? Or otherwise you're stuffing the high end of your opponent's turn.
Yeah. All right.
No, that totally makes sense. The
last one, I guess, is Withering Blue. I don't know if there's much to say about this.
What is your main blue count in the core? 16, 17?
So mine's actually usually 17. There was matchups when I was bringing in 16. One of the kind of few changes to the list between like this and I think Yuki's is I always like having my kind of backup blue, right? I can board up to 18. I think that list and other ones that were kind of being tested in a similar way capped out at 17. And I was just like a really big fan, especially because I'm not running Tunic into Iyslander, and I have like kind of a little less resource generation in that matchup where I'm running Trench. Being able to board up to 18 blues was just like a comfort thing, and I just really didn't want a red brick. I've been playing, Lexi for long enough that sometimes you're so used to seeing your all red hands and things of that nature. You're just like, man, I don't want to do it anymore. It's the same thing as with when you're fusing arrows, right? You're just like, I'm going to add the extra ice card in here because I just don't want to have to deal with it. If I can be rest assured that it won't happen, or is at least a little less likely to happen, feels a lot better. So that's one of the reasons. This Withering, essentially the third Withering and the third Pathing Helix, it was kind of just like a call that I made depending on like, does this frailty token matter, or would I rather have the reload opportunity / a 0 cost arrow, and that was kind of the main difference. The only time I had all of them in, it was against Iyslander.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Extra blues, extra pitch, definitely getting through ice is just like, especially channel, where you just want to fire. It's like a big arrow. Very important. The last card, I'm gonna skip over a couple of these because they're a little bit more self-explanatory. And Clay's gonna hate me for this, but let's talk about Tarpit Trap.
Let's talk about Tarpit Trap.
I think that like I understand it, you understand it, Ian understands it, Yuki understands it, and nobody else seems to really understand it.
This is some sort of weird Vancouver brain thing. I don't know. I don't know.
I think it's Ian's fault because he just like loves the card and he's so vocal about the card all the time, and because it's weird. So what I saw, and I don't know if you saw this either in the Lexi mirrors, is yellow Withering Shot, red Withering Shot, Frailty Trap. One deck I played had like all of them, like all 3 of them. Not one deck I saw in Lexi, and I was walking around a bit after the fact. I don't think I saw any tar pit traps, like period. Either they weren't running them or weren't signing or whatever. Yeah. I just like was not seeing this card, and I was a little surprised. But walk me through kind of your evaluation of the card, maybe specifically kind of why you're running it in opposed to like yellow withering and red and what's a frailty trap, right? I'm not getting that.
Frailty trap, yeah. A lot of folks are running frailty over this. I think I only saw tar pits, and maybe I'm even mistaken, but I played against Yuki in the day 2 of the calling, and I think she's the only other person. Yeah, exactly. Other than people who came from Vancouver, I don't know if I saw. I don't know if I saw any other ones. I had a couple people pick up tar pit trap and were like, "What is this?" Over the course of the weekend.
Same thing. They were just like, "Wait, it stops and on hit." It's like, no, not for the entire turn. That would be nice. Just this one. Just this one. So talk to me a bit about like your reasoning behind putting 3 of them specifically, because I know. I think Yuki put 2, you put 3, so it's kind of it kind of really depends. But so talk to me a little bit about your personal experience, I guess, with this card.
Totally. I mean, this does certainly come from some of the other playing with a lot of the other folks in Vancouver and kind of trying to find answers to like local problems. So we had a kind of plague of Katsu led by Clay DeAngelis, who you've had on here before, and trying to actually get around some of what Katsu can do, because Katsu is actually, I think, a really strong deck and perhaps an underrated deck in some respects. But looking at tar pit trap and just the text of this card and what it actually says, just stuffs that a lot of those combo lines like dead in their tracks, right? So like you started by just being like, oh, this is a great answer to Katsu. You shove this in front of a surging strike, and so the damage gets through, but all of a sudden they can't tutor, because it just stops the Katsu trigger outright. Or if you can put this in front of something like a Be Like Water, where you're actually fully covering up the damage, so there's like no hit for starting a mask momentum count, and then on top of that, the next thing that hits is still going to get stuffed. The fact that tar pit trap floats its effect until the next thing hits, just like blows open the door of what this thing can do and what it can stop. I think the other thing we discovered was this is really, really integral into the Uzuri matchup, because putting this in front of a Spider's Bite is crazy, right? You block a Spider's Bite out, and because the Spider's Bite has go again, it's now the next thing that hits you. Is not going to get an on-hit effect.
And
so
typically it's just one other thing coming at you, right?
Yeah, oftentimes, right?
Big thing. Yeah.
Uzuri, some Uzuris are certainly better at compressing their hands than others. But generally speaking, it's going to be Spider's Bite into something, into an Uzuri trigger or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But that means that their Spider's Bite gets blocked. You save the damage there. You can still block with the full power of your attacks if you so choose. But more than likely, it just means that the 6-power attack or the Leave No Witnesses or whatever it is that they're going to throw at you or we're planning on throwing at you now just doesn't have any text. And that's just a huge deal. So the reason that you bring something like this in over just another arrow or like a yellow arrow or something else is that as far as the resource side is concerned, it's going to do the same thing. You're still going to be able to pitch it for 2. It's going to pay for your Voltaire. It's going to block for 3, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But what it can actually prevent your opponent from doing is just, it can be pretty immense. And the mirror is, again, like another great example of that, right? A lot of people immediately go to the idea that, it's going to prevent an Endless from going back to hand, which is true. Like that's totally fair. That's just the example that always gets cited to me, and I don't entirely know why, because like that's fine, but often Endless is the least of my concerns in the Lexi mirror. But it's going to deny you the frailty token that's going to get to you from the Withering Shot that your opponent was relying on, or deny the reload from a Bolton Shot, or whatever the case may be, right? And putting a 3 block down and then this in front of a 5 or 6 power arrow, and then knowing the next thing they shoot is what's going to get denied, because oftentimes Lexi turns are kind of staggered that way, right, where you're expecting kind of like a worse thing to come down the pipe. The later in your opponent's turn it goes, it becomes you get a lot of equity out of this card in the mirror, and in a bunch of other matchups where that go again attack is going to be followed up by something even more sinister.
That's
awesome.
Fair. I mean,
sorry, like you said, the yellow pitch makes it worthwhile playing. If it was red, a little trickier.
If it was red, it would be really awkward, right?
Exactly, but Voltaire has 2 charges. It pays for both Voltaires. Yeah,
exactly. So it's rarely dead in your hand. There's occasionally times when you'll see it and you'll be like, oh man, I really, there was a game, I think the game I lost day 1, I drew into 2 of these out of 3 of a kind, and you're like, hey, that sucks. And that's gonna happen. You gotta pay the piper at some point. Playing Lexi, man. Like
both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. So that hurts, but like generally speaking, I'm not usually too upset when I see this card, because it's going to get a lot of utility for me in the matchup and allow a kind of tempo swing oftentimes by just denying something where otherwise I would have to commit 2 cards, right? And now all of a sudden I can commit 1, and that changes a lot of the math for how that matchup may go.
No, it totally makes sense. I think also I personally like it into also Runeblade, just stopping Moth Skies.
Yeah. Yep.
Big fan of just
Huge.
like this thing now just blocks 6 off red Moth Skies. Like you don't get your 3 rune chance, and I'm just blocking 6 with this thing because you don't get to create. Because I don't want to block Moth Skies.
No, for sure.
So I also really like it in Runeblade.
Really big, yeah. Red move into this. This trades up in a huge way. So I'm very sorry to all the Vincent players out there.
Yeah, it's like when the Vincent Viscerized do show up, now you're just I do have tech for you apparently. I do apparently have tech for you. But I think that's a pretty good rundown. Let's go through a couple of the main matchups that you probably saw in the game. People probably want to expect to see. Like let's talk about the main 3 here, it being Lexi, Dromai. I think the third one's kind of shifted around
between
a lot.
Bravo,
I think some people see
Iyslander.
Bravo, some people see Iyslander. I think depending on what their meta is, we could talk a bit about both here. So let's start with Lexi. And when I say like going through these, are just very short kind of bursts here. What arrows are you putting in?
What do you put in? What do you take out, if anything?
Yeah, nothing too extreme like a minute.
No, for sure.
Here. So let's start with Lexi because that's the deck that people are still considering the best deck. I don't think anyone is going to not consider Lexi still the best deck, especially among some of the results it's putting up. So let's start with the Lexi first.
Sure, I'll even get up my own version of this and just make sure that the information I'm telling you is even true. I don't want to lead people astray or make things up. So the Lexi deck, the way at least what I brought into Vegas, I'm bringing in kind of that core shell of cards there. I was only bringing in 1 Arctic Incarceration. It was really interesting. I played, I think, 3 or 4 Lexi mirrors over the course of that weekend. And the ice effects really do matter a lot of the time, but I don't want to necessarily be the one that's beholden to loading my deck with non-threats, right? So bumping up to 2 Arctics, like it's something that I waffled on, and I tried it in testing. I tried 0 Arctics, but there was just so many times when having that 1 red Arctic, especially early game, really set pace for the rest. So I ended up bringing up 1 Arctic in there. I run 3 fatigues. I cut the sleep darts. I know a lot of people run the sleep darts in the mirror, and I totally understand why. It's similar to kind of my philosophy around Warmongers, where like it is very play aroundable at the end of the day. I don't think bringing sleep dart into the matchup is wrong by any means. It was just something that like I wasn't super jazzed on the more I tested it, and I'd rather just have something like Fatigue Shot in there to kind of stuff on hits than try to like get my opponent on having a face down card that they may or may not be able to reveal, right? Or trying to like burn their snaps earlier in the game type of thing. 3 CNCs go in there as well. 3 tar pits absolutely go in there as well. And I think that was kind of the majority of it. I wasn't bringing in the lightning presses. Yeah.
So that sounds like 10 cards. So I guess you ran 61 maybe?
I ran 60. I'm trying to think. I'm looking at my thing versus yours.
Premeditate came out maybe, or
3 pre-meds. Let's see what you got up here. And you have the 1 Arctic.
The 1 Arctic, yeah. So I just took in like 3 CNCs, 3 fatigue, and 3 tar pits plus the 1 Arctic. Yeah,
plus the 1 Arctic. We're missing 1 card, hey? I think I might have cut down to... You know what? Oftentimes, this is what it is. Oftentimes, in the matchups when I'm bringing in that many tar pits, I will go down to 16 blues because you're adding in 3 yellows that you wouldn't otherwise add. So I ended up going down... I cut one of the pathings.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Because usually you add reds, but now you're adding...
Yeah, exactly. So instead of running 17, when the tar pits come in, I would often go to 16 just because your curve is actually a little bit better than you think it is because you're jamming 3 yellows in there.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. So that's for Lexi. Let's do Dromai because that's the other deck that kind of came out like heavily in top 8 and general, I think, across the column.
Yeah, I played against. I think I had 4 Dromai games over the weekend. It was good. That was the one that was the matchup that I sweat the most in testing for sure. Shout out to Ian for committing so many lunchtimes to just throwing Dromai at me on Talishar for like a month, if not longer.
Did he even want to play Dromai, or was he doing it mostly to help?
He was no. He was being a swell fella, and like because he knew that he was bringing Lexi as well. Like there was
merit to
there was benefit to him for us to talk through those lines, and essentially like what should we both be doing here if we were countering this situation, right? Here I'll pull up my Dromai. This is probably going to be fairly self-explanatory, but. We're bringing in as many poppers as we can, which in this case is 3 CNC and 3 lightning press, right? Lightning press is a popper on demand.
That's a good point.
Because you can just turn any of your arrows, or at least any of the yellows and reds and some of the blues into a popper by activating that while something with Phantasm is swinging at you. Bringing in 2 Arctics. I cut down to 2 pre-meds. Again, there is some concern, like you said, about things like Warmongers if they're not running the kind of Empress Mara Redline list, and they were bringing in Warmongers. But more than anything, we're just looking for slots and bringing in all these extra cards, like bringing in 3 CNC and bringing in 3 Lightning Press means you've got to find cuts somewhere. And I didn't want to board down too many arrows. No fatigue shot in here, but we are bringing in the sleep darts because those are, as we said, really, really good to prevent Dromai from doing what she wants to do. And then I'm down to 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 60 in blue. So I cut 2 witherings as well.
Okay.
Is that 60?
Let's see. 2, 5, 8. And you said 3 sleeps. That's 11 from here. Plus, you take out 2 pathings, right?
I took down the witherings.
Oh, 2 witherings.
Down 2 witherings.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's 60. You got it.
Sweet. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Just again, it's one of those instances where like the pathing, the withering, it's so marginal, but like the withering's never going to do anything in that matchup by and large. So you might as well have a 0-cost arrow. Actually, I'll take 2 seconds to talk about pathing here. Pathing is weird. Blue pathing is weirdly good because off of a ponder, off of whatever, if it's sitting in arsenal, like that kills a dragon. That shoots down a 2-health dragon and can be snapped and can then get you. An extra arrow for like a 3-of-a-kind turn. So it has weird utility. Again, this is one of those cards that I love because it has like all this weird flex utility, and blue pathing into Dromai is actually this like tiny little edge that I found myself enjoying, especially in testing.
It's a Chromai, I guess, too, because it only has 2 health and
crazy good Chromai.
Kyloria is a big hit too. Yeah.
And you can get the reload, right? So
and do you deal with Ashwings, or you just kind of let them live and?
Really depends. I'm usually letting them live, with the caveat that I know that if I'm letting them live, they will probably be the thing that kills me at the end of the game. I commit Hornet Sting to like the first Ashwing that attacks me. Like I'm not precious about Hornet Sting because the longer that Ashwing stays around and pokes me for 1, the more damage it accumulates over the course of the game. So I can kill one right away and gain that tempo back from kind of stopping it in its tracks. That brings me to my turn faster, which is great. But B, it just means that there's just one Ashwing that probably did like 5 less damage to me than it would have otherwise over the course of the game, and that's actually like really, really important. So I'm not usually killing Ashwings unless like something has gone wrong, or if I am far enough ahead and like the Dromai is only on Ashwings, they're on 0 Ash. And I think I have the space to kind of go and lay waste to that board. But it's rare that happens for sure.
Okay. That kind of tracks with the throw a whole lot of damage at them, and usually they've got 2 blocks. They don't also, for sure. Like a lot of their 3 blocks are invokes and stuff like that. They don't want to be blocking with these cards. All the time, so that definitely tracks. So that was Lexi, Dromai. We'll talk about Iyslander. I don't know how many Icelanders you played.
You know what? Weirdly, I came in expecting to play some Iyslander, and I didn't see a single one all weekend. Not in the cut, certainly not in top 8, and even before that, I didn't even just like see that many. I felt like walking around the venue, and that's probably just my own experience and maybe not good data. But I never encountered an Iyslander. But I can certainly talk about what I was gonna play if I saw him.
Sure.
So in this case, we board up to our 18 blues, and we're going to run our Charmers and our Trench. So we're going to get rid of Tunic, and we're going to get rid of our Hornet Sting. There was a brief period of time when I tried Hornet Sting and Iyslander, and it was pretty funny, but it didn't actually do anything. And by that point, I was back on Charmers. But hey, look, if you don't have the space for another arm slot, it's okay. You can just put that in front of a Wounded Bull or a Scar for Scar and try to nick them for an extra damage. It's great. So I brought in 2 fatigues into this. Again, this is a weird one where it seems odd to bring something like Fatigue Shot into Iyslander, but if they are running the kind of old school Bullander list and they aren't on the kind of in case, pure arcane damage, that actually does take away a lot of the equity from what they're trying to do, right? So much of that math is dependent on the idea that pitching a blue and coming in for this big 7 to 8 power attack is a really good trade-off, and all of a sudden Fatigue Shot just ruins that math, right? And they can't really play around a Fatigue Shot by playing a different attack first. There is no other different attack first, right? Other than Scar for a Scar.
You have to Scar, I guess. That'd be the only
that's kind of the only out. So Fatigue's good here. I was bringing 2 of those in. I would maybe actually reflect back and bring all 3 in, because right now I have 3 Command and Conquerors, and I think in retrospect I'd probably go down to 2 CNCs and 3 Fatigue Shots for exactly those reasons. And then no Arctic Incarcerations because they can play around them too well. I don't bring Sleep Dart into this for the same reason. It can be really good, but a good Iyslander player should know how to play around a Sleep Dart, and I was respecting them enough to just not let them walk all over me in that way. And then 3 Lightning Press as well came in, because you want to, again, they're starting at a lower life total. Some of these on hits really, really matter and can really kind of interrupt their turn. And more than anything, you just want to stay on top of them. Lightning Press, because it's an instant too, plays really well around some of their own instant speed effects, right? So you can stack a Lightning Press on top of whatever Iyslander is trying to trigger if they're like doing that in the certain windows. So if you have shot an arrow at them and like in the reaction step or whatever the case may be, they're trying to like land a frostbite on you to deny something else. It's similar to Rain Razors where you're just going to want to play that over top, and it can kind of blow them out in ways that they don't expect, where they thought their CLF or they thought whatever they were trying to throw at you was going to end your turn, because maybe they thought you had an extra arrow in hand or whatever the case may be. This can just be, just kidding. It's actually just 3 more damage on top, and now they're eating that damage, and you don't have to worry about whatever attacks they were trying to send back at you.
And that's 60.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Especially for the CLF, just like responding at instant speed just saves you so many resources.
Yeah, again, it's any amount of things you can do like that into that matchup feels really, really good. And in some respect, it feels better than playing the Rain Razors there, because the Rain Razors, you want the equity of having a really wide turn.
Yeah.
Whereas a Lightning Press, you don't need that, right? Like it can just be the one arrow for the turn. And now they've committed a CLF for pretty low value because you're ending your turn. And all of a sudden, they've also taken 3 more damage that they didn't expect to have to take, right?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Let's talk a bit about Bravo, who I did see a fair amount of at the event.
There was, I think,
the Bravos, apparently.
Yeah, there was more Bravo than I had hoped necessarily, although this is a really interesting matchup, and one I do like a lot of the time. I don't like it if it's just, here's 3 Spinals and a Crippling Crush for 4 turns, and
enjoy my foot.
GG, shake my hand. Like, we don't love that. But there is a lot of interesting parts to this matchup, and it's certainly another one that we kind of practiced a lot and talked a lot about. And I'm not totally, again, as I make edits, the list kind of going forward, it's something I might revisit. But I do think we've kind of got on a good track for this kind of fatigue Bravo list that appeared, the one that's actually running Titan's Fist and is running Buckler, et cetera, the one that's not strictly just trying to throw stuff at your head. Trying to essentially get them, trying to fatigue the Bravos, right? Like all of a sudden, like turn the tables on them, make them stare in the mirror and wonder what the hell's going on for a second, because all of a sudden the Ranger's trying to fatigue you, and that's largely what the board for this looks like. So we end up running 66 cards total. Okay. We're swapping out the quivers here, so we're bringing in Abyssal Depths rather than Rustling Leaves, and then we're kind of just throwing everything in the kitchen sink in here. The only things we're not bringing in are the Arctic Incarcerations and the Tar Pit Traps, and like everything else comes in.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I tried running the Tar Pits just again to get like even more cards in, and it's not bad because, like we said, it is a yellow that blocks for 3, which isn't off rate for Lexi. But the issue is if you end up having to pitch them late game, you're drawing back into them when you want threats, and you don't have them, and that feels really bad. So you end up just kind of chopping them out and chopping the Arctics because they only block 2. Bravo doesn't usually care about Arctic Incarceration, and just loading and everything else. So the real key here is trying to do things like recur your Command and Conquers with codexes or codices, use those Lightning Presses to get over the top where they don't think you're going to, land your drill shots, blah blah blah, and then just keep recurring stuff. Between 3 codices, 2 Remembrance, and the Quiver, like you're just trying to keep putting threats back in your deck. And once Bravo's out of armor, there you go, right? You're just trying to keep knocking them down.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a bit more of a situation where now I think a lot of the Bravos are kind of just like, if you play a more fatigue style and that's your strategy from the start of the game, you're kind of just giving Lexi so much agency to just set up big 6-card hands and just blow it out. But
for sure.
They're still very able to like go more aggressive, whatever that means. Slamming big attacks in your face if they have them,
for sure,
while not taking that much damage, and then like pivoting to a slower plan if you've already done so much damage, and then chipping away with Titan's Fist, which is definitely seems like a better strategy now, especially that like fatigue is really only good as your main strat when people aren't expecting it, right? And so now I think because of Birmingham, kind of just like 2 or 3 Bravos showing up and top, like Bravo just overperforming by just fatiguing all the Lexis essentially. It's I don't think that's going to come up as much as like their main plan if they've been watching that kind of thing.
For
it's
sure.
Definitely nice to have like at least a hedge on the Lexi side in case that happens.
And Yeah, you are more or less playing to that end state, right? Where you expect them at this point to try to throw a Starstruck at you every time they can, or anything of that nature. But eventually, they are going to try to just chip you out. So you have to kind of like it's a real, again. This is why I think it's an interesting matchup and one that is fun to play. As long as it's not just like, hey, here's 5 big dumb attacks and you're dead. If there is a little more of that ebb and flow, I think that it is actually one of the more interesting, tete-a-tetes to kind of get into right now. And I'm still kind of working my brain a little bit around what more I want to do to try to get a further edge in that matchup, if that's kind of the way those games are starting to play out.
Yeah. Were there any other matchups that you played on the days that you want to talk about, whether maybe your board and plan did really well, like maybe they overperformed, or maybe it was just like you had a plan and then you played that hero and you just got like dumpstered or something? Obviously.
Yeah, we can talk about getting dumpstered. We can get dumpstered.
Less so when you make top 8 because you didn't lose as many games.
That's true.
Maybe there's like a game stuck in your head or something.
I think the 2 biggest takeaways on the weekend, maybe 3 biggest takeaways, were the Lexi board felt really good. Tarpon felt really good. We talked a little about that. Yeah. Sorry, the mirror. Yeah, the matchup into the mirror felt really good. I do think things like Tarpon helped a lot, and I think in some respect too, having played this deck for what feels like 1,000 years, or at least this hero for 1,000 years, not necessarily just the Fuse list. I've seen so many spots where or I felt like I could identify what to do, and also I pretty much know what was in my opponent's hand because of the way they were sculpting their turn, right? And I think reps and just doing that so much, you kind of get the soul read. So that plus the board felt really good, and Dromai, the board to Dromai felt really good as well. Lightning Press, MVP of the weekend for sure. Kind of never upset when I saw that because it did so much work.
Right.
And playing through that so much, and playing that matchup, so many times, and kind of finding a board that kind of answered, I think, the kind of 2 sides of Dromai. Also went a long way. The dumpstering came from Uzuri. Came from my very last game before the top 8 against Nathaniel, I believe, who that's one that I'm still struggling with, and I need to try to commit, I think, a little more time to, or just accept that, look, I'm going to scoop this one and go get some lunch or something.
Fair enough.
Not sure which is the better strategy at this point, but it's very hard. A lot of the testing that myself and Ian and some other folks did was into contract Uzuri, because that was kind of what seemed to be more popular going in, and this idea that they're going to try to fatigue you, right? Like, you want to board up in a similar way you board up into Bravo, because you're going to want to recur threats, because they're going to keep milling you out, they're going to keep chipping you, with all the things that they can potentially do. The issue there being that if they're not on that, and they're on like the more usual Uzuri stealth build, all of a sudden your board just kind of sucks, right? Like, those remembrances, those are bad now. Like, there's a lot of things that just like don't work, and that was essentially the issue that I ran into in my round 13 or whatever, my very last round on day 2. Whereas I brought in a board kind of prepared for contract and prepared for fatigue, and that's not what I got. And so that's kind of one of those issues where I think I'm going to have to kind of revise a little bit what your plan is if you don't know which version of Uzuri your opponent's on, because it can do a lot, right? And I think looking back and reflecting on getting dumpstered in that way, knowing that this person had made day 2 and knowing that this was like they were X and 2, I guess, at that point, and they had killed a lot of Lexis on the way there. Like, if that's the case,
they're probably on contract. Or the other way around.
They're probably on stealth, right? They're probably on stealth, because if they were just on contract and that was their plan, and that's what most people in theory are trying to tech for.
Right.
And that gets weird, right? Like, that's not the kind of metagaming you want to be doing in your own head at round 13.
Right.
But there's an element to that in retrospect.
That makes sense.
Reviewing some of those games.
Yeah. But I assume you still had Trench in that matchup, I guess?
Yeah, still had Trench in that matchup.
Okay. I guess it didn't save you in all of those scenarios where they...
No, I think... Yeah, I think I saw, I think Nathaniel just got off to such a strong start, and then they're just, I kept kind of like trying to find my spots and be like, okay, we're not going to block this because, XYZ reason. And then the thing that I didn't block ended up turning into surgical extraction. And you're like, okay, well, now my turn's bad, right? Because I have the 3 of a kind ready, now it's gone. The only thing that would really get me here is the thing that I saw. And it was a lot of stuff like that, right? Okay. And that's just the way it goes, and it's totally fair. But it's that one is, I think, was the biggest L I took all weekend in terms of actually just being like, this deck doesn't work. It is not doing what I want it to do right now. And is a bit of a puzzle to solve for sure.
Yeah, you got to find a middle ground between the 2 Uzuri builds, I guess. In the same way that you have it for what was it?
For
I guess
Dromai?
for Dromai, exactly. Yeah, for Dromai.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure. That is kind of the goal.
Yeah, this is definitely. I'm just looking at that build now because he did top 4 the event, and this is a very definitely on the more aggressive side.
He was very aggressive. It was a super
Nimblism
aggro
in there.
list.
Ooh, spicy.
He's got Earl, like definitely more of the wider red rabble. Like he's definitely putting in like go wide tech. So it's an interesting.
Wow.
But it is,
I got looking for a scrap. I got nimblism.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, okay,
That's
what I'm ready for is not what's coming. So.
Yeah.
I just love that you just like this is the meta where now you nimble strike and you're like, no, I'm not playing sealed. I'm just shooting on you in CC with nimble strike. And then you're just like coming in for 8 go again. And
it's just like, value.
Yeah.
Sometimes value is good.
Because they're just like, I'll take the 8, and then you just isolate stealth and CNC, and you're like, well, you took 8, and now you're gonna see the
exactly.
Yeah, that's rough. Yeah. That's rough.
It's like you watched my game, man. Yeah, it was not good. That was one of the matchups where I played Tarpit Trap, and he like picked up the card and was like, "What is this?" And then he was like, "This is really cool." I'm like, "Yeah, I wish."
Luckily, it didn't matter.
I was like, "I wish it did more here," but I'm like down like 80 life, so like this kind of sucks. But it did do the thing I wanted it to do, which was get in front of a spider's bite, and I think like deny a death touch or something. So like I was frailty free the next turn.
That's really good.
No, so which was really good. It's just like that alone wasn't enough because there was too much else going on.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. That's kind of all we had here. Did you have any shout outs and or I know you've kind of been sprinkling them in the
True.
which is good. But do you have anything else that you wanted to kind of shout out and recognize at this point?
Yeah, no, I mean, shout outs to all those folks in Vancouver who, show up weekly for sure. And, the time we're recording, I'm getting ready to go to an army to try out some new stuff for Nat. So that'll be pretty exciting too. And it's always great getting to test with all those folks because, I think Eric and I are both more than happy to, fist bump and cheer on the local scene because it is, what we say earlier, small but mighty. Ian, hugely instrumental for giving up, like I said, I don't know how many lunch times, especially when I was like playing Levia way back when, because I was a bit of a Lexi naysayer. Yeah, I was a bit of a Lexi naysayer when they banned Bullseyes. I was like, I don't think we're gonna, the ceilings, like it's not the same anymore. Like we're not gonna get there. Like can't do the same amount of damage. Blah blah blah. Yeah. And in my like fit of ennui, started playing Levia and had a lot of fun because that deck is a lot of fun.
Yes.
And forced a lot of people to jam games into me playing Levia when they probably could have been doing anything else. But eventually gave that up, and the reason that this version of the list is called Ian Pilled is because in like talking and playing so much, he convinced me that don't play Levia, don't play Ice Lexi. I was playing pretty dedicated Ice Lexi for a while too. Like the Fuseless list is still very good. It's very workable, and so then I actually started putting the time and the reps in. Like I said, over many lunch breaks, kind of getting that back up to speed. So yeah, huge shout outs to those folks who gave up some time to jam games then or otherwise. And then shout out to upcoming. We've got a Battle Hardened coming up in Vancouver. So if you want to try to take down the local scene, like be my guest, come on down in
I know
in October.
I'm coming, but I probably won't do well. But I'm coming anyway.
I prodded Rob to come over here just to test.
It's a good excuse to come
That's
over.
great. Yeah, absolutely. Like it'll be really exciting, and I think we've wanted something out here for as long as I think a lot of us have been playing the game.
It is kind of hard, I guess, being completely on the West Coast where it's like
totally.
But it's a good excuse to visit because I hear it's beautiful.
Yeah, no, it'll be great. I think, like I said, it's a sweaty scene, but it's a very friendly scene.
It is a very sweaty scene. Holy.
But we're really excited for that coming up, and I think we're very dedicated to the idea that we want people to come and play and come from afar. We certainly don't intend to give up our only battle hardened title. Someone locally is going to take that thing down. We're pretty committed to that.
Nova Scotia or New Brunswick.
Yeah, there's no way we can't let it happen. But we want to take all comers and all challengers. So look up Battle Hardened Vancouver and start making your way down here for sure.
Awesome.
Fair enough. That is November 4th, in case anyone's curious. So it's technically the last week of ProQuest too. I don't know how they did the scheduling for the ProQuest. I'm not going to get into that. I don't want to rant here, but it is going to be November 4th, 3rd, 4th that weekend there. So it is a PTI draft event with Battle Hardened main CC with a Super Armory on Friday. So those tickets are up. As Eli said, come and show us our place, apparently. Or just not. It's up to you. But with that, thanks, Eli, for coming on to the channel. Of course, representing the local scene. Quite well, I would say. Top 8ing a colleague that large is very very difficult.
Yeah.
600 registrants, I think it was.
Something along there.
Something
Yeah,
crazy.
It was a lot of rounds. It was quite sweaty because it's a big event. So.
Had good practice at Baltimore earlier as well. I think it was like a 900-person event that I managed to make day 2 on. So I was like, okay, we've done this once before. Surely we could do it again, right?
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's totally fair. So that was the deck, and that was the kind of experience. So for everyone watching, if you like this kind of content, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And from wherever you're watching in the world, have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Bye for now.